Every SIEM on the market today advertises an API, and the docs will show you an endpoint for every record in the system. And yet every team that is actually built on one of those APIs knows the same frustration. You get all the data, and somehow you still don't have the product. This series is about fixing that, about taking a web-based SIEM and converting it into a headless one. And this first module is the why, because until you can say precisely what's wrong with just use the API, you can't say what the conversion actually has to move. So here's the claim. For 25 years of web development, the API and the user interface were never equals. The API returns records. The application, the part that makes those records useful, lives in the head. Think about what a screen is actually doing. A record might carry 40 fields, but the page shows you 6, because somebody decided those 6 are the ones an operator needs. A status comes back from the API as a word, and the page decides whether that word is reassuring or alarming. A button sits grayed out until a precondition is met that no schema anywhere mentions. These aren't display choices. They're operating knowledge, the accumulated judgment about how the product is meant to be used. And all of it sits on the wrong side of the API. The API is a parts bin. The GUI is the assembled machine. And that's why just use the API has always been harder than it sounds. Strip the head off, and what's left isn't the application. It's raw material. You don't have to take that on faith, because you can audit it on any screen you own. Here's one of ours, a case opened in our console. The screen an analyst stares at when the only question that matters is this real? The moment it opens, it hands you everything you need to answer that. The story, the evidence, the suspects. So ask the question an integration engineer never thinks to ask. Where did all of this come from? Because the case the API returns is a dozen lines, timestamps, a severity, a list of signature IDs. That is not what you're looking at. Chase that gap, and the screen starts giving up its secrets. Open the network tab and count. That one case view fired half a dozen calls. The signature IDs came back as names and descriptions, resolved against the detection catalog. The timeline came from a bounded event search the page derived for you. The right entities, the right window. The MITRE tags were mapped from the signatures that fired. Even the similar cases panel is the page fingerprinting behavior and searching its own history. None of that assembly exists in any single API response. And here's the part that should worry you. When that bounded search comes back empty, the page knows the difference between no related events and a wrong query because the page built the query. A caller gluing raw API calls together doesn't. An empty answer returns nothing, and nothing looks exactly like good news. That assembly, the gathering, the ordering, the judgment, is the entire difference between having data and having an investigation. We ran this audit on our own screens, and the findings kept sorting into the same 6 categories. The question the screen answers, what it gathers to answer it, the order it asks in, the judgments it encodes, what it promises to show when there's nothing to show, and what it lets you do, and when it refuses. 6 columns. That's the audit, and it's phase 1 of the conversion, because you cannot extract logic you haven't written down. And here's the uncomfortable part. Everything in those columns is application logic, decisions your product makes on behalf of a customer. And right now it's expressed in CSS, in a sort order, in a disabled attribute, documented nowhere, tested nowhere, versioned nowhere, available to nobody who isn't a human being looking at that exact page. So that's the why. The head was never decoration on top of your product. The head is the product, and the API was always the parts bin behind it. Converting to headless doesn't mean deleting the head. It means moving what the head knows, the gathering, the sequencing, the judgment, into a surface a machine can call. And to show you the shape of where this goes, when we ran this conversion on our own product, that case view became a single callable capability. Ask once, expand case, and everything the screen assembled comes back as one investigation-ready answer. The case, the resolved signatures, the bounded evidence, the timeline, the MITRE mapping. And when a step can't complete, it says so, and says why. A partial answer that admits it's partial, never a silent gap. One screen became one capability, carrying everything the screen knew. That's the conversion, and it starts with the audit. 6 columns, one screen you own. Next module, what headless actually means once the operator is an AI agent. By now, every security vendor has an MCP announcement. Connect your agent, the press release says, and your SIEM is AI ready. Module 1 taught you why that sentence deserves suspicion. Just use the API was never enough for a human integrator, and the parts bin doesn't get friendlier when the caller is a machine. So here's what headless actually means in the AI world. And it is not that the agent can reach your APIs. It means the application logic that used to live in the GUI, the workflow, the interpretation, the guardrails, is now reachable through the surface the agent connects to. Same head, different doorway. Think about what the GUI was ever for. It existed to teach a person how to operate your application, which question to ask first, what a value means when a button is safe to press. An agent needs to be taught exactly the same things. The difference is the classroom. A person learned your product through screens and navigation. An agent learns it through the capabilities it discovers and the descriptions they carry. So add the third line to the whiteboard from Module 1. The API is a parts bin. The GUI is the assembled machine. The MCP is that same machine, rebuilt for a different operator. The head didn't disappear. The teaching target moved. Now let me show you the version of this that ships constantly and fails constantly. A vendor announces MCP support. You connect your agent and you get one tool, search events, taking a single string called query. That's the whole surface. And in the demo on stage, it looks like magic. So put it to a real test. The question an operator actually asks on a Monday morning: which of my log sources went quiet this week? Trace what that agent has to do. First, it has to speak your query language, which it has never seen, so it invents syntax, and it invents it confidently. Then it has to know which field carries a source's identity, and in your schema, there are 3 candidates. Then it needs a threshold. How quiet is gone quiet? An hour? A day? Your product has an answer. The tool doesn't carry it, so the agent picks one. And underneath all of that sits the problem no search can solve. A source that stopped reporting isn't in the results at all. You cannot search your way to an absence. 4 guesses deep, every one of them unchecked, and each guess compounds the last. And then comes the finale. The invented query runs. It matches nothing. 0 results. And the agent, fluent, helpful, confident, reports back, everything looks healthy. Module 1 left you with a warning. Nothing looks exactly like good news. This is that warning, detonating. And notice what kind of problem this is. It is not an AI problem. A smarter model makes the same guesses more eloquently. It is not a prompting problem. You cannot prompt your way into knowledge the surface never carried. It is a tool design problem, and it is yours. In security tooling, an empty answer that arrives as reassurance is the single most dangerous thing you can hand to a caller. Run the same Monday question against a converted surface, and the difference is the whole lesson. The agent doesn't get a search box. It discovers a capability whose description says when to reach for it. Evaluate data sources. The health verdict across a tenant's ingestion, with reasons, 1 call, and the answer already knows what the screens knew. The roster of sources that should exist, the thresholds your product actually uses, and the missing sources called out by name, with 0 results arriving as a critical finding, not as silence. The agent didn't get smarter. It inherited the assembled machine. So hold the 2 pictures side by side, same model, same question. One surface handed it a string and a prayer. The other handed it your product's judgment. That is the whole redefinition. Headless is not a claim about connectivity. It is a claim about where your judgment is allowed to live. And here is the standard to carry out of this module. An agent is the least forgiving integrator you will ever ship to. A person filled your product's gaps with experience. An agent fills them with confident guesses. Your product is headless when an operator who has never seen your screens, human or machine, can ask it a real question and inherit the judgment, not just the data. Next module, how you actually design that surface. Capabilities named for outcomes, not resources. Look at the names in any SIEM's API documentation, and you'll see the same vocabulary. Get data source, list data sources, update data source, run query. Those names describe what the system stores, not what an operator wants. Nobody has ever walked into a SOC and asked for a data source by ID. They ask, are my sources healthy? Is this case real? How did we do last quarter? Modules 1 and 2 showed you why the parts bin fails and what an agent needs instead. This module is phase 2 of the conversion, designing the capability surface, and it comes down to one rule above every other. Name every capability after an outcome an operator asks for, never after a resource, never after an HTTP verb. Put the two vocabularies side by side, and the difference is physical. On the left, evaluate data sources, expand case, summarize case metrics. Each one is a question an operator already asks, finished. On the right, get, list, search, run, raw material an operator has to assemble. And here's the test that separates them. If the agent has to chain 4 calls and apply your thresholds itself to answer a routine question, you haven't converted that screen. You've moved the parts bin to a new protocol. One capability answers one question, completely. Every capability you ship is 5 decisions, and you should be able to recite them for each one. The name, outcome shaped. The arguments, everyone explicit. The scope, the window. No context the agent is supposed to magically know. The return, every field named, so it means something without a schema lookup. The empty case, what comes back when there is nothing to report, decided in advance. And the trigger, one sentence that says when an agent should reach for this. Write those 5 down and you have a spec. Skip one, and the agent fills the blank with a guess. And Module 2 showed you exactly how that story ends. 2 failure modes account for almost every bad surface. The first is designing too small. Get source health of 1 ID. So the agent calls it how many times? From what list? And how does it notice the source that stopped existing? The one that isn't in any list. A capability that needs a loop around it isn't a capability. It's a parts bin with better manners. The second is names that carry nothing. Score, value, status, data. Score of what out of what. Higher is better or worse. A field name is documentation the agent actually gets to see. Spend it. Porting a screen means porting 4 things, and most teams stop after the first. Gathering. The capability makes the same calls the page made, so the caller asks once. Most teams ship that and then wonder why the agent still behaves badly. Interpretation. Return the judgment, not just the numbers. This source is stale, and here is why. Not a raw timestamp for the caller to threshold on its own. Your thresholds ship inside the tool, versioned and tested, not in the CSS completeness. Missing data is a field with a stated reason, never an absent key, because absent keys teach the agent to invent. And refusal, the disabled button becomes a structured no, the precondition that failed, the reason, the remedy, not an empty result. By now, you know what an empty result becomes. Now, the question every team asks at this point, does this mean you can never expose raw query? You can, as an escape hatch, validated, bounded, read-only, and never the recommended path in your descriptions. When we converted our own product, the query tool stayed. It validates the query language. It refuses unsafe forms out loud, and its description points the agent at the outcome capabilities first. That's the pattern. The escape hatch exists. It just isn't the front door. So here is Module 3 in one sentence. Your tool list is your product's vocabulary, the set of words an agent gets to think in. Name those words after outcomes. Spell out the 5 decisions. Port all 4 things. Keep the escape hatch off the front door. And convert the judgments before the breadth. 10 capabilities that carry real judgment beat 200 that carry none. Do that. And a capability becomes a promise. Ask this question, get this answer completely. Next module, the part everyone skips until it bites. Trust. The boundary moved, the controls didn't come with it, and we'll rebuild them on the new surface. Identity, classification, confirmation, audit. Connect an agent to your product and ask a simple question. Where does security live now? For 20 years, it lived at the API line, keys, routes, access lists, because the API was the door. But you spent Module 3 putting your APIs behind logic. The capability is the door now. The agent never touches your API directly. It touches the surface, and the surface fans out underneath, which means the old line cannot protect you anymore. And this is the module where that lands. Security has to be implemented at the MCP line, not the API line. Not as a wrapper around the surface, as the surface's own design. There are 5 controls, and every one of them lives on the new line. Notice what the API line can still see. Fragments. One capability call becomes 6 API calls underneath, a roster probe, per tenant fetches, a bounded search. An API key that authorizes those endpoints authorizes them for every purpose in any combination forever. The API sees traffic. It cannot see the question. The MCP line is different in kind. It is where the operator's intent arrives whole. One call, one question, one scope. That is the only place authorization can mean anything, because it is the only place that knows what is actually being asked. Enforce where the intent is, not where the fragments are. Roles come first on the new line. Before any call is made, the role decides what the surface even looks like. A tenant operator connects, and the cross-tenant tools don't refuse. They don't exist. That surface never contained them. A managed security provider sees their assigned connectors and nothing else. That is RBAC at the MCP line. The tool list itself is access control. Then per call, the second gate. Every request resolves to the signed-in principal. Entitlement is checked on your side, and a caller-supplied tenant is never trusted, because the agent remains a very fluent, very confident source of arguments it made up. And when a role changes, the old token dies with it. Reconnect, and the surface is re-derived from who you are now. Label every capability by what it can change. Read only. Write, destructive. Put the label in the description so the agent knows the weight of a tool before it invokes it, and the auditor knows it after. And for anything that mutates, the capability takes an explicit confirmation argument. The agent has to say in the call itself that it means it. A mutation is never a side effect of a question. Asking about a case must never close the case. Audit lives on the same line, and this is where your compliance team wins. The API's access log shows 6 gets and a post. Traffic, not meaning. The MCP line writes 1 line per invocation. The principal, the capability, the arguments, the scope it resolved to, a summary of what came back and when. Who asked what, of which tenant, and what they learned, answerable in 1 query. The console logged page views. The API logged requests. This logs intent. And the last control follows from it. No generic write capability, ever. The specific named change, with its own validation, its own label, and an inspect-only twin for the dry run. Here are 2 answers to the same question, and they are the reason all of this matters. Answer A, sources, an empty list. Answer B, expected sources, 14. Coverage, 0 of 14. Interpretation, no sources reporting. Severity, critical, same data. The agent turns answer A into everything looks healthy. It turns answer B into an incident. One of these gets a customer breached, and it is not the one that looks alarming. So count your own tools. How many return answer A today? Write the number down. That is your Monday morning. And Module 3's completeness port is the fix you already own. So the picture is complete. The API line still exists, but it guards plumbing now. The security your customers actually experience is decided at the MCP line, a surface shaped by role, every call resolved to a principal, weights labeled, mutations confirmed, intent audited, rights named, 5 controls, and every one of them is a field or an argument, which is the insight worth keeping. Trust is not a wrapper you put around the surface. Trust is surface design. The same discipline that names a capability decides what it may change and what it must refuse. Next module, the finale, how the agent finds the right tool, how practiced workflows become skills, and the single number that tells you the conversion is actually done. Everything so far can be true. Outcome-shaped names, ported judgment, a locked-down boundary, and the agent can still fail in a way that surprises teams every time. It reaches for the wrong tool. Put 40 capabilities on a surface and ask a plain question, and the agent has to choose. On a large surface, the number one cause of bad agent behavior is not a missing tool. It is overlapping tools with vague descriptions, two capabilities that both sound plausible, and a caller with no way to tell them apart. This final module is about finishing the job, routing, skills, the order of the work, and the one number that tells you the conversion is done. Routing is teaching, continued. The GUI taught a person with navigation. Your surface teaches the agent with descriptions. So write every description as when to call this, not what it does. Include the phrasings an operator would actually use, because those are the strings the agent is matching against. Disambiguate the near neighbors out loud. This one covers one tenant in full detail. Its sibling covers the whole fleet in summary. Say it in both descriptions. And publish one cheap capability whose only job is the map. Ask it which family of tools answers which kind of question. We ship exactly that, a routing cheat sheet the agent can consult before it chooses. Ambiguity you resolve in a description is a guess the agent never has to make. Skills come next because some deliverables are not one capability. They are a practiced workflow, the monthly report, the case investigation, the onboarding assessment. Package each one as a named procedure, which capabilities in what order, what to do when evidence is missing, what the finished artifact looks like, and keep one line sharp. Deterministic work stays in the tools, narrative work goes in the skill. The skill decides what the report says. The tools decide what the numbers are. Cross that line and you will find yourself debugging pros. Order matters, so sequence the conversion with 4 rules. First, don't retire the head. The console stays. It is your audit surface, your debugging surface, your fallback. Second, start from the top 10 questions your support tickets actually ask, not from your sitemap. Third, run both surfaces against each other and treat every divergence as a rule you missed in the CSS. The screens still know things your capabilities don't. And fourth, you have heard it already, and it is worth repeating at the finish line. Convert the judgments before the breadth. Measure it like this. Take an agent with no custom prompting, no hand-holding, no examples. Point it at your surface, cold. Give it the 20 questions your operators actually ask in their own words. Count how many it answers correctly on the first try, and note every time it reaches for the wrong tool. That count is your conversion score, not endpoint coverage, not tool count. Those are vanity, measurable while the thing still doesn't work. The score moves when the names get clearer, the descriptions get sharper, the judgments get ported. Run it every release and watch it climb. Done looks like this. An operator who has never seen your console, human or machine, asks, "Is this case real? Which of my sources went quiet this week?" Build the board report, and the answers come back carrying your product's judgment, scoped to exactly what that operator is allowed to see. Deterministic underneath, auditable afterward. No training, no tour of the screens. The product taught its newest operator itself because the teaching is in the surface now. So, end where the word began. Headless never meant your product lost its head. The head, the gathering, the judgment, the guardrails, everything the screens spent 20 years learning is still the product. You audited it out of the pixels. You named it as outcomes. You guarded it with identity and refusal. You taught an agent to find it. That was the whole conversion, and it leaves you with a different product than the one you started with. Not an API with documentation, but an application that can operate itself on behalf of anyone allowed to ask. You haven't exposed your API. You've rebuilt your head for the operator who actually showed up. Now go count your tools that return an empty array.